This is how it works now. When the gates of earth won't let you out, this is where you fall down. You weren't ready when heaven rained down in a storm cloud.
All right, welcome back, friends, to the Happy Pill podcast. I am so excited for this guest to come onto the show and share her story with you. She is like the Cher. She is like Beyonce. She only goes by one name, Carling. There we go. How you doing, Carling?
I need you to introduce me in everything in my life.
Done. I'll send you an invoice.
I'll be like, Ursula, come with me. I need you to introduce me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not a problem. I would totally do it. I love it. I think it's
Amazing.
fun. Yeah. How are you doing? Thank you for coming on to the show.
Oh, gosh. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm excited to have you here because I was just on your show.
Yeah.
So now you get to come and flip and be on my show and tell your story. Yay.
Oh,
Because as
God,
we were
it's
just talking about, it's like we were just talking about, right? Like how can you make depression exciting?
Yeah. I mean, I just say if I'm not laughing, I'm crying. So I might as well laugh at my trauma.
I've seen that with your posts. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I don't think I do that. So you have to explain that. Like, what is it about your trauma that you find funny?
Well, I think, no, I don't know that it's funny, which I think is funny because I didn't realize one day I was in therapy and I was like telling this quote unquote funny story about how in grade 7 I was spit on by a bunch of kids and called fat. And I was like laughing. And my therapist was like, but Carling, is that funny? And I was like, yeah, it's funny. And she's like, is it funny? And I was like, is it funny? I don't know. And she was like, I don't think that sounds funny. And then I was like, well, this is depressing. And then she informed me that laughter is like a trauma response and a coping mechanism. And then I was like, well, I guess that's my whole personality then.
Yeah. Can we laugh at that?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's safe to laugh or not.
I know. No, always default laugh.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Because I wouldn't think that was something. Because when you talk about that, and I've seen some of your videos, I'm like, I don't know if I can like that. I'm kind of torn. Kind of like, I want to support you in your show and share it all. She's laughing at it. Okay.
I know, but if you're laughing, I think it's relatable. I think more people need to embrace I mean, I go to therapy, I do cry, I'm not just
just to get the balance.
Yeah, it's about balance. Yeah. Yeah, but I got to find humor in it or else I don't know where I'm going to be.
Yeah, no, it's so true, but interesting, hey? So she keeps questioning, are you sure?
Yeah,
Are
and
you
I was
sure?
like, it was one of those awkward like taper off laughs. And I was like, well, now I'm not sure if it's funny, but I've always told the story with this humor around it.
Interesting. Well, let's get to your story. We'll put the laughter on hold for a moment. I should add a laugh track in here. Okay, that's going to be done. I'll add a laugh track. You're like the only guest that gets like a sound effect.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay. So here we go. We're going to start. And go.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess my story, I have a whole bag of traumatic stories, but I think one thing that is a recurring theme that I'm really interested in like diving into and talking about that I think more people need to hear is this like recurring theme of the power of language and representation. And we touched a bit about it on the very end when I interviewed you, but it's this idea that I ponder and wonder where my life would have ended up had I had access to representation and seeing myself in media, in families, in people I know. And, if I had language to use to express how I felt. And, I kind of weave throughout this life of mine, these little stories that are funny or not, depending if you ask my therapist. But but it
Insert laugh track.
it does ironically start in grade 7. I came out as a lesbian and that was kind of like a big deal for me because I was bullied. I never quite fit in. I always felt a little bit on the outside. And it wasn't until I got my first job at Perkins Family Restaurant and Bakery as a host that I met what would become my first girlfriend. And I had never felt that, like that crazy, I mean, I was 14, but like that level of like attraction and energy, and you just kind of fall head over heels. And I didn't even know what that meant. And it wasn't until that experience that I was like, oh, this is a lesbian. Like, before that, the only time I had really heard of, seen, this idea of a queer people was like on Jerry Springer. I'm
Mm.
thinking, 1996, 97. And
Jerry Springer.
Jerry, yeah.
Right? Terrible.
Yeah, terrible. And, the only, queer people that I saw were these horribly um performative stories of, love triangles and, people cross-dressing, I say it in quotes, and all this stuff, and it was such a mockery, and it
Oh,
was
yeah.
so, and I would watch it, I would hear my dad commenting on it, and, you know, talking about how disgusting it was, and so I knew that that wasn't me. I didn't see myself in that, and so therefore I am not that. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older that like the Ellen DeGenereses showed up in media, and that was kind of shunned and, pushed to the side. That didn't go well for her at the time. And so I was
Mhm.
like, oh, well, I don't want that. That's not me. And so, I came out, I remember telling my stepmom I'm a lesbian. And I said, don't tell my dad.
Oh,
And
dear.
she said, "Okay," but then she went and told my dad, who then
Yeah.
went and told my mom,
Oh my god.
as was, I don't know, society in 1997, 8 or whatever. And, it wasn't addressed. My family does this really cute thing where we just don't talk about things, and we just don't address it, and then therefore it does not exist. And so I think there was a very brief conversation about, "You're too young, you don't know what you're talking about," you know,
Mhm.
to
It's a
we'll just
phase, you'll get over
yeah,
it.
we'll just shove it under the rug and not talk about it further.
Yeah.
And so, weaving through my life, I'm the youngest of 2 kids, and for some reason, and I will probably never know now because my dad has passed away, but I was always the least favorite child. And
Oh.
yeah, and and there are, family members would admit seeing these behaviors that I was always pushed to the side, told to be quiet, not given as much attention. And what that created was this need. I mean, every human has this need to belong and feel accepted and, feel, celebrated and all of these things. And I just never got that as a kid.
Hmm.
And so, then at 14, I'm trying to figure out who I am. I come out as a lesbian, and I'm, met with shame. And, I joke that I was put back in the closet and then ironically got sent to a Catholic high school.
Oh my
you know,
god.
I do think there was some irony in it. I went to it for a lot of other reasons, like the drama program for one. And so, now I'm in high school. I'm trying even more to fit in. And, I'm coming from junior high where I was bullied relentlessly. And my only goal, as a 15-year-old is to just like fit in and find friends. And so, then insert the next however many years of Catholic indoctrination and, what is marriage and, all of this stuff. So, um, yeah, it's like at some point through that experience, I decided that the only way to fit in and get acceptance from my family, from society, from friends was to, start checking the boxes of what was, being told to me was going to make me quote unquote successful.
Mm.
And so, I didn't tell anybody, at this new high school that I had been in a relationship with a girl. And I dated boys. And, then after high school, all my friends started getting married. And um, I remember just seeing all of this love and acceptance and praise being thrown their way because they were, I call it the straight agenda because they were
Mm.
checking the boxes, and that comes with so much celebration. And I wanted that. I tried so hard to get, my dad's approval, my mom's approval. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to all these things. And I was always just felt like I was just on the outside. I didn't quite belong. And, so then I think one summer I was a bridesmaid 4 times or something ridiculous. And
Oh, wow. That's a lot.
yeah, and so I was like, well, I mean, I guess I better get married because I'm tired of being, the only one without a date and all this stuff. So I went, my friend encouraged me to do online dating, but back then it was Plenty of Fish, which is like
Oh,
barf. 10 out of 10, do not recommend.
are they even still around?
Oh, yeah, they have an app now and everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's called POF now. The cool
Oh,
kid,
okay.
that's what the kids are saying.
Oh, yeah. Young
And
ones.
so I, met who would become my future husband. And, right from, it's always easier to dissect things after the fact and, from a high up lens, but I can see so clearly that I was ripe for the picking to be in an incredibly abusive relationship. I was, had low self-esteem, didn't quite know who I was, desperately wanted to feel connection and acceptance, and was willing to overlook a lot of things in order to get that. And
Mm.
the second, I said, "Oh, I met somebody and he seems really great," my family, my community, my world, my friends were like, "This is amazing. This is so
Wow.
great." Suddenly I'm invited to, double dates because I have a date to bring, and I'm invited to, couples things, and my family wants to meet them. So now I'm being invited to these family dinners and, all of these things. And so that made it really easy to overlook red flags. There were none
Right.
as far as I could see. And in hindsight, there were many. This
Do you
guy was basically wearing red.
do you wanna talk about what those red flags were?
Oh, yeah, I think it's so
Yeah.
important because I right away, he had a tragic story of his childhood, which made me, feel sorry for him. It excused, maybe some questionable behavior about honesty and, um, loyalty, and It he told me just enough that if anybody kind of brought up any trouble that he had been in, I would have said, "Oh, yeah, like, he's told me about it." And, you know, and and I always say, like, if he had, punched me on the first date, I probably wouldn't have had a second date. But what happens is it's a really slow dance, and he's this, like,
Yeah.
perfect guy who thinks I'm so amazing and can't believe, and we have all these things in common, and he thinks I'm beautiful, and, we suddenly have all the same dreams and goals, and, you're just kinda wrapped up in this whirlwind, and and then the first time that I don't know, what's a good example? The first time that I found out he was messaging another girl. I was upset and he made it up to me by, some big act of whatever. And then, buying me gifts or something. And then quickly moved the relationship ahead really fast and was like, "Why don't we move in together?"
Oh,
And
wow,
so
yeah.
within a couple months, we're now living together, and then the next thing happens and maybe it's a bit worse. Maybe, I have some money go missing and he's looking at porn on my computer.
Oh, wow.
And now, like, those things seem silly to break up over because we live together. Like, we're in this committed situation, cohabitating situation. So it's a little bit easier to overlook that. And then, then we bought a house, then we got a dog, and
Mm.
as the relationship progressed forward, bigger things started happening, but I was so trapped that I didn't feel like I could end it. And,
Wow.
at the same time, parallel what's happening is, my dad loves this guy. My mom thinks he's the greatest. My sister's husband and him to build projects together. And, like, he's so ingrained in the fabric of my life that, you know, I didn't know how to get out of it. And
Mm.
I remember when he proposed, I knew that I didn't want to get married to him for a lot of reasons. One of which is I am a lesbian, but like a lot, there
That's
was
a
a
big
lot,
one.
yeah, a big one, but there was a lot of reasons. And I think he knew that. And so he proposed on a stage in front of 2,500 people at a huge public event. And
Oh,
all of
no.
my friends and family were there. And so, I'm not going to say no because I'm in front of all these people and don't want to be awkward. And so I say yes. And then this thing happens when people get engaged. And I've yet to meet somebody that's like, no, I don't think that's true. It's like the ring goes on your finger and the couple gets put on this train and it is propelled at lightning speed towards the altar as the ultimate win or something. It's like you're on a game show and suddenly you're being like congratulated and celebrated and people are literally giving you money and gifts and planning events and you're
Wow.
and so who am I at that point to be like, I don't know if I want this because I'm suddenly
Mm.
getting all the like love and acceptance and inclusion and celebration that I had so desperately wanted through my whole childhood that I wasn't getting, and now I was. And because I was checking that box, like met a boy, check. Bought a house, check. Got engaged, check. And nobody ever stopped to say, how do you feel about this? Is this what you want? Are you happy about this? And, would I have lied and said, oh, yeah, like I'm so happy? Maybe. But
Mhm.
maybe just somebody stopping and questioning this would have changed. I don't know. I don't know what would have changed, but
At that time, though, like with, because your family's been a little bit, oh, you're queer, no, don't want to be around. Oh, you're straight, okay, we're coming forward.
yeah.
Like, did you have any friends or companions at that time that you could just totally express your truth to? And then, sorry, excuse me, that they would say, like, hey, Carlene, we're just kind of noticing, something. Did you have anyone like that?
No, I had one
Mm.
friend that, didn't. So, I mean, as with the cycle of abuse and narcissists, anybody that loved him was brought around, accepted. We were super close friends with them. Anybody that questioned or wasn't sure or
Mm.
was a little bit off was immediately taken out. Saying things like, well, I overheard them saying this, or I don't like the way that they do this, or and so so by design with that type of relationship, I didn't have anybody. And I did have one friend when. So the other thing is, like, I never saw my parents fight. I never saw conflict resolution. I was never taught about healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, consent. And so I was modeling the same type of relationships that I saw, which were you don't talk about it, you don't bring it up. If something's wrong, just deal with it. And so I didn't have the language to say, I'm being abused and this isn't right. I don't feel good about this. This thing happened and I don't like it. And I just grew up in a way where you don't talk about it. And none of my friends were complaining about their partners. It was almost like we were in a race to, you know, what's that keeping up with the Jones, you're just trying
Yeah.
to, you know,
It sounds a lot like Pleasantville, if you've ever
yeah.
seen that movie. That's,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you don't talk
yeah,
about those things. And
yeah.
so, I didn't know how to say it. And I still struggle today, if I have an argument with somebody, expressing it to somebody or talking it through with somebody, because if things get resolved, I don't want them to have this, bad taste in their mouth for somebody that I'm close with. And
Mhm.
so it's not a skill that I had. And, the relationship went on and, I have to laugh because our blessed wedding day was just, I'm agnostic at best. And the universe was like, listen, girl, you cannot go through with this. but I am also very hard-headed and will, you know, ignore all signs to do what I think I should do. And so we like woke up late. We got lost going to the church. We and then as I walked through the doors to the like where you get married, my parents were on either side of me and the arch fell on me. Like the
Okay,
universe
if
was
those aren't red flags.
yeah, the universe was literally like, okay, we're going to have to physically stop her. And
Yeah.
I stepped over it and carried on and, did the thing and got married. And it just like, I didn't think there was another option. And it wasn't like I didn't think gay people were bad. I didn't think all this stuff. I just went with the path of least resistance and the path of most acceptance, which was getting married to a man and ignoring everything that everything was telling me. And so, 9 months after getting married, I mean, it was a nightmare. It was awful. And
Oh.
it wasn't until he was physically mean to one of my dogs. And in that
Oh.
moment, it was June 19th, whatever year it was, I just remember. And I was like, I'm done. Like this, I can put up with a lot, but like you do not hurt an animal. And, that was kind of the start of finding myself again, despite, disappointing everybody. And, at one point my dad said, like, are you sure? Is there anything that he could do to like make it up to you? And sure, I hadn't disclosed a ton of the abuse, but like, by this point, there was a lot of stalking, harassment. I hadn't
Oh.
been told that he had an extensive criminal history. That is like apparently not a requirement to get married, like disclosing.
Oh,
Yeah.
what?
And so, I mean, what would then happen would be 10 years of stalking, harassing, criminal harassment, attempt to obstruct justice. I moved 6 times. I changed my number 4 times. I changed my email 7 times. Yeah, like
Jeez.
he broke every restraining order and, that was what
Oh my
happened.
gosh.
So, yeah.
Well, so what was this time frame from when you met him to like marriage or divorce, or like how long was this time frame?
Yeah, we met and we moved in together within about, I think, 3 months. We bought a
Okay.
house within a year and a half, and then we probably got engaged by 2 years, married by 3, and then divorced 9 months later. Or not even divorced. It took me 10 years to get a divorce, but
Oh my
separated.
god.
Yeah, because
10 years?
because I wouldn't drop criminal charges.
Good
And
girl.
so, yeah, I was having, he wouldn't cooperate in the divorce unless I dropped criminal charges, and I wasn't willing to do that. So, yeah,
Wow. So
yeah.
what happened? Like how did it finally end? Did he accept the charges or what?
Well, no, it ended up, I mean, the legal system, as we talked about, like in your episode, is truly designed to keep people out of the system. And, I see and appreciate the notion of innocent until proven guilty, but proving guilt beyond reasonable doubt is single-handedly one of the hardest things to do. And, I had found out that he had a criminal history dating back to a preteen. And so by the time I was involved, he had more experience getting away with crime than the police charging him
Oh
had
my
been in
gosh.
service. Yeah. And so, I think he ended up with, say, I think 15 charges, and that got whittled down to about 5 that were prosecuted. And of those 5, 3 got found guilty beyond reasonable doubt. And that's not to say that he was presumed guilty, but you can't convict and charge or and sentence somebody unless there's beyond reasonable doubt.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and then by then he hired the most expensive criminal defense attorney, and he had a girlfriend who was pregnant with his child that was coming to all of these trials. And, even What's
I'm
a
sorry.
lot of
He
people.
he had another girlfriend that was
Hmm.
pregnant and
Yeah.
brought what?
Yeah. Yeah. And she sat there and listened to my testimony, cross examination, witness statements, everything, all the evidence. And, I think one thing that a lot of people don't know about is that, you hear all these things where you get to read like a victim impact statement. And at least in Canada, everything is charged separately. So there were 3 charges, which means there were 3 judges, which means there were 3 trials. And you
Oh
cannot
my God.
discuss the other ones until there's like an actual conviction. Like they're presumed innocent until found guilty of that one charge. And so when it came time to read my victim impact statement, his defense team, got to approve it or deny it before I got to read it in court. And so I had to submit my victim impact statement. They had a whole bunch of issues with it because I referred to other crimes, but like, so I could only discuss the impact of, the one time he vandalized my vehicle.
I don't understand. How do they have the right
Mm-hmm.
to approve your victim statement?
Mm-hmm.
This is
Yeah.
your statement. This is your
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah. Not great. And
I'm sorry to
so,
hear that.
yeah. And I found out, so I had found out, after I left him and learned about this criminal background, that he had been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and which is like a sociopath basically, and with a moderate to high risk of reoffending.
Oh my
And
God.
then enter me and reoffending. And then part of his sentencing for these crimes was another psychological evaluation where he was independently diagnosed as antisocial personality disorder with a moderate to high risk of reoffending. And, he only ended up getting 90 days of a conditional sentence. And a conditional sentence is you check in on a Friday after work and then you go home Sunday afternoon, and that counts as 3 days. And
Unreal.
otherwise, you can, because he had a kid now, the judge was like, well, he needs to be able to provide for his family and he has a good job. And
Oh my
so,
God. This
yeah,
is making me so angry.
I know. Oh, yeah,
Like,
this is
just,
why I'm laughing.
yeah.
And
Oh
so,
my God.
yeah, so I mean that, yeah, that was that. I mean, that's a whole 5-part series over on my Patreon in itself where, we read the emails and the, all of this stuff, but I like that experience. Just I can't help but look back on it, and I don't blame anybody, but I wonder if as a youth if I had seen representation of how I identified in media and others, and had language around, my family wasn't religious. It wasn't like, you hear people that are scared to come out because of religion and what their families will say. It was just a lack of vocabulary and representation,
And
and there was
support.
and support. Like there was just no, it wasn't,
None.
yeah, it just didn't exist. And so I was just kind of trying to fit along and fit in and do what would get me the acceptance that I so desperately wanted. And so I mean, I'm sad for my childhood self because,
Yeah.
if I had just been given a bit more acceptance and a bit more attention and a bit
Right.
more understanding, or, anything, what would have happened if I had come out and stayed out at 14?
Yeah.
I mean, who's to say who I would have ended up with? But so then, in coming out again, so in, while all this is going on with the courts, simultaneously, I am rediscovering that, I went on a dating site and, you see the question, are you interested in men or women? And I was like, oh, I don't know. And,
Mhm.
I started, I actually got a personal trainer, and, she was a lesbian. We ended up sleeping together. It was a nightmare, but
Yeah,
but I mean,
it's cardio. It's cardio.
yeah, it was cardio. It was just extra cross training. And
Yeah.
I think it really was that relationship with her that was like, oh yeah, I am for sure a lesbian. I'm now in my 20s, and so then I had to come out again, but I had all this shame around the first time it had happened and this disappointment I felt. And my dad was like, well, it's okay, but as long as you promise me that if the right man comes along, you'll consider it. And I was
Oh my
like,
God.
and so by this point, my family knows everything that happened with this husband of mine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
because I'm
so,
curious to know what their reaction was with all of this.
yeah, it was just very like, that's a shame, Yeah, like I don't think they really, because we don't talk about things, right? We just,
Right? Yeah.
I mean, my dad came to court and was very, had this bravado of, we're going to get this guy. But it was more coming from a sense of like he wanted to be part of the heroics and not necessarily acknowledging the trauma that was there.
Right.
And so, my dad said, it's okay that I'm dating women as long as, I'm open-minded enough to know that if the right guy comes along, I will consider it. So, I mean, I'm still waiting, but so
I don't think you're waiting. I think that train has
yeah.
long gone. There's not even tracks
No,
anymore.
it's just
It doesn't exist. It's
Yeah.
completely overgrown with
Yeah.
weeds and stuff.
And then, my mom kind of reacted in a way that she kind of got defensive, or it was almost like, and I don't fault my parents for how they reacted. I think they're a product of how they were raised and where they came from. And
Yeah.
I never thought that they didn't love me. It was just they did the best they could with what they had. And my mom said, I mean, that's okay, but you have to be okay with me dating younger guys. And like,
Your mom said that?
yeah, like to be clear, there was never an issue with her dating younger. Like my parents had been divorced and my mom was dating, and
Yeah.
it was like she just had to, she didn't know how to just accept it. She had to come to the table with like a trade-off or something. I don't know. It was like, it was a really weird thing. It was so bizarre. And I was
I'll
like,
trade you these young men and
Yeah.
you give me these women. Okay.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. And then my sister was married to a very Catholic family and into a very Catholic family. And, she said, something about love the sinner, hate the sin. I'll pray for you, something. And so, I had to,
I can't always agree with that. I just
oh
can't.
no, it's bullshit.
Good
Like
God.
I don't agree with it at all.
Yeah, oh my God. I had one of those like little TikTok things, when they put the scroll thing over your head and it's
Yeah.
like, love the sinner, hate the sin. I'm like, why the fuck would I love him and
Yes.
them
Yeah.
and that one for doing what they did? Like, really? No.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like, no,
How
thank
about
you.
loving me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Sorry, I cut you off. Please
No,
continue.
I don't know. Like we are on the same page.
Yeah.
And so, and I looked around and, I wanted to live as a lesbian, and I had no idea like where to find community because all my friends were straight and married with kids. And, I didn't know what life was going to look like. I was in survival mode for so long. And so I had to really like seek out community, and I didn't even know like how. And so
Yeah.
I found, I can't remember how, maybe one of my friends told me there's like a website called meetup.com. And yeah, you can literally type in anything and there's a group of people for you. And I typed in lesbian and Calgary, and I found the Calgary lesbian meetup group. And I went to my first, I picked there was like a coffee meet and greet thing. And I was like, well, that seems pretty safe. I like coffee and it's in the middle of, the afternoon. And so I went, and, that was kind of the start of suddenly seeing myself and in this group of people. And like, what a powerful, I can't even, I think we
Nice.
I think I think straight white people take for granted, seeing themselves in everything.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
they're in literally everything. And I think it just, yeah, I give a lot of thought to how powerful, I made a conscious decision in my relationships as a lesbian to like be the representation for my nieces and nephews, for the kids in my life, for when we're out in public and we're holding hands, I do that intentionally because I know
Hmm.
that there is a human out there that has not seen that before and might see themselves in that. And
Yep.
that might be the thing that's like, oh, I didn't know that that was an option and that I see myself in that.
Hmm. And so does your family, well, sister, is she comfortable with that?
Yeah.
You being so open and out and
Yeah. She's since divorced because, as with a lot of Catholic marriages, her husband cheated on her.
mm,
And, after 4 kids and a lot of drama, they finally broke up. And I think she's a lot more accepting now. I think she was sort of victim to, like going along with him and his family's beliefs. And, like me and
mm.
my partner weren't allowed to sleep at their house. They lived right by the airport
Wow,
and we were going to go to Mexico one year. So it made sense if we could all just leave from their house, and we weren't allowed to sleep at their house.
that's pretty extreme.
And
Yeah.
I was like,
Okay.
we're not gonna have gay sex, like, on the living room floor at dinner time, right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
not like,
You,
we're
you
just
don't get the queer from hugging, like it just or like talking or engaging. But
Yeah.
what I always find interesting too is that there's a lot of women who, are married or were married that end up coming out into the
Mhm.
queer community.
Yeah.
So I hear that. I've heard that so much about this unhealthy marriage to a man, and for whatever reason. I'm not saying that all women, I'm not saying that all marriages are bad, but it was like, okay, there's another one, and you start having this little Costco counter,
Yes.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, there's more, oh, there's more, oh, hey, hey, hey,
Yeah,
hey,
because I just, I think if we I have to find it, but there was a study done. I actually have to find it so I can reference the real study. But there was a study done about the impact and the effect of assigning what happens as a society once you are assigned a gender at birth. And,
Mm,
even from in utero, you're like, okay, it's a girl. Well, right away, this study showed the way that a woman is treated is different, the way she carries is different, the way people prepare for the baby is different. And then this little baby comes out and they assign it female at birth, and suddenly it's in pink. It's more often held facing the body. Babies and infants that are assigned female at birth or presumed
cool.
female are more often held facing inward and close to the
Didn't know
body,
that.
whereas boys or babies that are assumed to be boys or assigned male at birth are often held facing out to see the world
Interesting.
and further from the body. And so like it's just like it goes so
Wow.
far back. And like they did the study where they just dressed if it was a female baby and they dressed it like a boy, that baby was more likely to be held facing out and a little bit further from the body. And, suddenly it's
Yeah.
like, okay, she's got a vulva. Therefore, success for her will be being quiet, being,
Mm.
appeasing. And
Though those stigmas, right? Those
yeah.
stigmas and just though these old, old, old ancient ideas
Hmm.
and judgments that are placed on children,
Yeah.
and certainly on female or female identified or gendered,
Yeah.
you know, it sets them back right away. Like you're talking, like even in the embryo stage or in
Yeah.
the fetus stage, it's like they're already being set up
Yeah.
to be passed over, to be submissive, to be abused, to all
To
these
be
kind of things.
sexualized, you know?
Sexual, oh my
Like
god,
little like
right?
toddler shorts that are quote unquote for girls are lower riding, shorter in the leg, and often have no
Yep,
pockets, which is bullshit.
yep.
And every pair of bottoms should have pockets, but that's a whole other
Oh yeah.
topic.
That's another podcast. That's
Yeah,
a solely different podcast.
and if you get the same size in shorts that are, quote unquote for boys, they're longer in the leg, higher waisted, and have more pockets.
Yep. Yep.
And I just like, I get you could go as extreme or as basic as you want, but
Yeah.
it was set up for me very early on that success for me would be, and that's through society, that's through professional
Yep.
friendship.
Yep.
Success for me was going to be this. And so I finally, after, it took me longer than most to figure out that to be successful in my family and society, this is what I would have to do. And I picked the worst one, and that's that. But
Because you didn't get the lesson earlier. You didn't
yeah.
get the red flags earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 But, I mean, I think it really has shaped how I use language. And, when I have 2 step-kids now. So that was the other thing. I didn't
Nice.
know that I didn't have to have kids. I
Oh.
just
Oh.
assumed that I would get married and have kids because that's one of the check boxes. And
Right.
I never heard the, like, I never heard people talking about choosing.
Right. You have the right to choose. Did you know
Yeah,
that?
I did not
Yeah.
know.
Now you
And
know.
yeah, I very easily could have ended up having kids, and then where would I have been with this guy?
Oh my God.
And
Where his
so
next partner is.
yeah, like he's got a
She'll get a
kid,
wake up
and
call.
well, they're since separated, shocking.
Mhm.
Um, but what a powerful thing to just very slightly shift the language. And, so I have 2 stepkids because the person I fell in love with has kids. And instead of saying when you get married, I just say if you choose to get married, if you get married. Because you
Mhm.
know what? You don't have to. You don't have to get married. And who you marry if you choose to,
Yeah.
I say, when you decide to start dating, if you decide to start dating,
Yeah.
and if you choose to have kids, it's just changing that one from when to if.
Yeah.
And I think the freedom that opens up, that whether, my stepdaughter decides to date, period, or date a boy or a girl or both, and whether or not she chooses to get married and have kids, that doesn't equal happiness or success.
Yeah. No, absolutely not.
I want you to
I
be a contributing member of society. I want you to be kind. I want you to, treat others, help people.
yeah.
Other than that, like, do what you want. You don't have to own a house. You
Yeah.
don't have to drive. You don't have to, all
You don't
these
have to
things.
conform.
Yes, conform.
Right?
That's
Like,
yeah.
you and my partner should have a conversation because she was raised as a witness, and
Oh,
oh, yeah. Yeah, that's met some challenges. So, we'll have to get together one
yes.
time and then have this, extended conversation
Yeah.
because that is something. But, as we're gonna kind of wrap up, the show here, I wanted to just touch briefly on, like, what are your healing techniques and tools that you have learned? Because as you became aware, what was happening? Like, you've talked about therapy,
Mhm.
but how has that healing journey been for you?
Yeah, I think really the biggest thing is just questioning everything. I
Mm,
literally just, I started to embrace this curiosity about why. And, why though is like my tagline in life. Why do we have to get married? Why do we have to, do these things? Why does that equal success and happiness? I don't understand
mhm,
that. And really embracing that inquisitive side has been really healing because it's made me open my eyes to a whole other life and
mm,
find like-minded people. And if you're straight, white, cis, and you want to get married and have kids, that's so beautiful. I love this for you. But we
mhm,
shouldn't just assume. And, I recognize there's a privilege in having access to therapy. And I think, finding mental health support or community support is key.
mhm.
Finding that group of lesbians, the Calgary Lesbian Meetup group, was
Yep.
huge in
Yeah,
experiencing a sense of community that I had never thought I could belong to. And
yeah,
yeah, I just I was like going against it felt like I was going against the grain trying to fit into this society that was not built for me. And
right,
just like starting to ask why and seeking out connection that felt authentic was huge.
right.
And like
Absolutely.
antidepressants.
Yeah. Yes. I got a couple. Yeah, absolutely. Or whatever kind of medication you
Yeah.
choose to prefer. So
Yeah.
it just one final thought. What would you like to share as a final thought to our listeners?
Yeah. I think take 5 minutes and evaluate everything through a lens of why.
Mm,
Why do we use the language that we use? And it's not, you're not going to make somebody queer by asking. It's just a very funny story. My sister told me the other day that her daughter, who is 14, had her first kiss. And I knew it was with a boy because I know that their family structure. But just to be funny, I was like, oh, was it a boy or a girl? And the look on her face, she was like, well, obviously a boy. And I was like, why obviously?
yeah, I was just
And
going to say,
then,
why obvious?
yeah. And she was like, oh, no, you're right. And to her credit, she caught herself
Oh,
and was like, oh, no, I mean, you're right. Like, it's totally fine. It just, yeah, like I know that it was a boy because, like, and she's rambling and back talking and, and it,
justifying and
yeah.
everything.
And it
Yeah.
was just like, I didn't want to assume that it was a boy because maybe it wasn't. And
Right.
yeah, so just evaluate the words that you use and how you use them and how you were talked to and how that's led to, some of the
Mhm.
ways that your life ended up.
Yeah, absolutely. That is such great and sage advice. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your story. It feels like there's so much more
Oh God, there's too much.
that you could. Oh, perfect. Good. Because that could always create another episode
Yes,
later on down the road. Let's keep sharing. Let's keep talking. So
absolutely.
thank you, Carling. That's it. Just one name.
Just me.
Carling. That's it. Just her. Just her. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing everything. You are such a delight. And I look
Thank
forward to
you.
having you come back again at some point and we can continue this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll just pair off being on each other's podcasts over and
Totally.
over.
Right? Back
Yeah.
and forth. Maybe even, like I said, we'll just meet up for coffee. That might make it easier.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, friends, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you require more support and information on depression, please contact your local healthcare provider, distress center, or in Canada, go to canada.ca and search mental health support, get help.